Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome to our Michigan Game Day edition of the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Our guest today will be beat writer Michael Cohen from the Detroit Free Press. Before we hear from him, let's get started with a few of my thoughts. Until last year, we heard an awful lot about Michigan's road woes in the Big Ten, dating all the way back to the Lloyd Carr era. Last year, we fared much better on the road, except in East Lansing. This weekend, JJ and the boys take the show on the road to Iowa and Kinnick Stadium. From the fans I talked to, I sense an air of confidence about this game. That's good. We should be confident. We also have to be vigilant and take seriously that Iowa is a very good football team. Their offense has struggled. We've all seen that. They are getting better, though. They're getting healthier. Kirk Ferentz teams play a style of ball that just isn't sexy, but it is effective. The recipe is run the football, don't make mistakes, kick for field position, and play to your strength, which is their really good defense. My heart says we'll win this game by a couple of scores. My head tells me we've been down this path before when playing these guys at Kinnick Stadium. If we don't play from the lead on Saturday, or let these guys get us into a low-scoring, muck-it-up kind of a game, we could be in for a dogfight. With Iowa's defense and kicking game, I don't like that scenario. My guest today says Saturday's game is a classic battle of strength versus strength. Michigan's offense against Iowa's defense. He's looking forward to it. With us next is beat writer Michael Cohen from the Detroit Free Press. So don't go away. Here with us on our game day edition of the show this week is beat writer Michael Cohen from the Detroit Free Press. Been a while, Michael. Great to have you back with us, though.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it always.
Well, it's going to be a busy week, of course. It's Michigan's first road game, and we're going to talk about that. But let's start with a quick look back on Saturday's Maryland win and get your take, because it was maybe not what fans were expecting going into that game, but it sure turned out to be a good test on both sides of the ball, didn't it?
Yeah, I would say so. I think, look, last year's game, what was it, 59-14, I think it was, in College Park. There's no question that this Maryland team has made significant strides since then under Coach Mike Locksley. You know, the offense was bolstered by bringing in Jacob Copeland, a really good wide receiver transfer from Florida. They found a really good true freshman running back in Roman Hemby. They've got at least two players on the offensive line, if not three, who will be playing in the NFL next season. So it's a good offense. And on defense, you know, I thought they played well, but maybe a little bit better than they are in reality. And part of that was because of some of the mistakes that Michigan made. You know, J.J. McCarthy had three plays that easily could have been turnovers. against Maryland. He had both of his fumbles, and obviously a fumble can go either way. Who knows what's going to happen at the bottom of a scrum or who's going to fall on it. And then he had that pass into the front corner of the end zone that was intercepted, but the player only got half a foot in bounds instead of a full foot in bounds. So there were 3 opportunities that Maryland had to potentially take the ball away from Michigan and really either turn the tide of momentum or extend the momentum that they had in the first 2 quarters when they played better than Michigan. So I think it was a little bit of an eye-opener for the Wolverines. We had a chance to talk to a few players on Monday after speaking to Coach Harbaugh, and all of them kind of said, there's a lot of places that we need to improve, or there's a lot of things we need to get better at. We're excited about the potential. We think we can do it, but that game kind of showed us, some areas where we need to get better. That was sort of the overall vibe that we got from players and Coach Harbaugh speaking to them on Monday. So I think you're right. I think it was a tougher test than Michigan expected, a tougher test than the fans expected. And I think this weekend's game against Iowa could be another grinded out slugfest.
Oh, absolutely. Your thoughts on J.J. McCarthy's performance overall, Michael?
It's an interesting one to evaluate, right? Because the first couple of games he was in there, he set such an unbelievably high standard that it would be almost impossible for him to match that in Big Ten play. He'd have to have just a flawless game of his life type performance. And to do that against the caliber of athlete and caliber of coach at these Big Ten schools is unlikely relative to, your UConns, your Hawaiis, your Colorado States. So in that regard, it was a significant departure from the level of play he showed earlier this past weekend against Maryland. What do I think overall? I don't think there's any question that he brings things to the offense that Cade McNamara can't. He's able to throw deep outs, deep comebacks. He's able to throw from one hash to the other, and it just zips out of his hand. It really does fly nicely off his fingers, and you can just see the ball just looks different. It sounds different in the air because he just is a more natural and more powerful thrower of the football than Cade McNamara. I think his decision-making is subpar. I think there's times when he has really good decisions, when he goes through his progressions and is willing to take the check down. But when we see the other moments, and I'm working on a story right now, by the time this podcast comes out, it'll probably be published, but he held the ball for 15.6 seconds on a play where he rushed where he picked up a third down when it was 3rd and 7 and scrambled all the way around. He held the ball for 8.4 seconds on his second fumble of the game. And so I think that when we see these moments of extreme control from J.J. McCarthy, when he does look really, really good, I think there's times when he's fighting himself because his natural instinct is to do what I just described and scramble around like he's in the backyard or like he's in high school and make all kinds of crazy plays. So I think this season is going to be a huge test of how much JJ can suppress some of his natural instincts for the sake of what's best for the offense. And I think there's going to be times when he does it great and the offense looks tremendous. And then I think there's going to be other times where it potentially bites him in the backside. And we saw some of that against Maryland. And
that's what fans have to always keep in mind. He is uber talented, but it is a process, and there are going to be bumps on the road, aren't there?
There are. And the good thing is, from a personality standpoint, this kid really, really wants it. He really, really wants to be good. He's willing to put in as much work as humanly possible, sometimes more than he should, which resulted in the injury to his labrum that was described as shoulder soreness from overuse in terms of all the extra passes and workouts he was doing last season and into the winter and into the spring. So I think he has the right temperament. I think he has the right mindset to get to a place where he's one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten. I just think that there's going to be some big bumps in the road along the way. There's probably going to be a game where he throws multiple interceptions. I think fumbling is going to be an ongoing problem for him because of the way he plays the position. Not only is he more prone to fumbling simply because he's going to run the ball more than Cade McNamara, that just is a simple fact, but also because of his willingness to extend plays. The longer the ball is in his hand, the more time there is to potentially have a fumble. So I think that's something that the coaching staff is going to really have to work with him on, ball security, all that kind of stuff. Because, his style of play just exposes him to a higher element of risk than Cade McNamara.
Well, one of the things we learned on Saturday is that Blake can handle 30 or more carries in a game, and that was a sensational performance from him, wasn't it?
It really was. And look, I've been down on Blake Corum at times because I think some of his stats that he's put up throughout his career have been pretty hollow. If you look at what he's done against Big Ten opponents, This was only the second time he's ever rushed for 100 yards against a Big Ten opponent, and the other one was Northwestern last year, whose defense ranked outside the top 100 in rushing defense. So he has not really done it against some of the top teams. Rutgers held him to 60-something yards on 21 carries. He was held by Wisconsin. He was held by Michigan State. He had one huge play against Ohio State, and if you take that away, his numbers were poor in that game. Same for Iowa. And then obviously he had 3 carries for 13 yards against Georgia. So against some of the better teams, he hasn't been able to do it. Now, I was impressed. I did not think he was a guy that was capable of carrying it 30 times and looking good from start to finish, and he looked tremendous. So perhaps my assessment of Corum has been too harsh over time, and maybe this is the year that he proves he can do it against all the Big Ten opponents. But, this is a guy who is clearly electrifying, clearly has unbelievable vision, can stop on a dime, can make every cut you want him to. He's a tremendous worker. He's got an awesome attitude. He's a really likable guy. And if he can continue to perform this way against Big Ten opponents, he will answer a lot of critics like me who said that, there's still something to be shown there because he hasn't necessarily done it consistently against the best teams on Michigan's schedule.
Well, as you mentioned at the top, that Maryland offense has some really big-time talent to deal with. And overall, I thought the Michigan defense held their own. What was your take on that performance?
I thought the defense played pretty well. I think you look at the first 2 quarters and you'll say, okay, it wasn't that great. They allowed points on the first 3 possessions. Maryland was moving the ball in chunks, and that's all true. There's no doubt about it. But I thought the way that they tightened up in the second half, the way that they improved their tackling, the way that they were able to generate more pressure on Talia Tagovailoa and, eventually able to even knock him out of the game with what I think was a hip injury, it shows that, when this defense is not playing its best, it will make adjustments at halftime. And that's a credit to Jesse Minter. That's a credit to defensive line coach Mike Elston. And it's a credit to co-defensive coordinator Steve Klinkscale for organizing and improving on what was not a great first half by any stretch of the imagination. But the defense got it done when it needed to. It got 2 interceptions, which has always been an issue for Michigan the last couple of years. Getting interceptions, period, but then getting multiple in one game is a great step in the right direction. And so I think this defense has a lot of potential. I just think they have to continue to find ways to generate pressure on the quarterback. That would be my biggest concern for this defense, is that I think their blitz package is fantastic, but I think their 4-man rush leaves a lot to be desired. And that was the problem, I think, in the first half, is that the 4-man rush was not getting any pressure on Tagovailoa, and he had plenty of time in the pocket. And so Jesse Minter was forced to blitz more often than he normally does.
Well, I agree with that. It's only been 4 games, and granted, 3 of them were against very poor opponents. But is it too early to be concerned with that lack of a pass rush?
No, I don't think it is. And the reason I say that is because for the first time on Monday of this week, so, you and I are recording this on a Tuesday, so 24 hours ago, we had players admitting that the pass rush is a problem. And even Harbaugh acknowledged that it's an area of focus, I think he said, which is about as close to Jim saying that something is a weakness as he's going to get. That's just not something he likes to do, is point out areas on his team that need improvement. He's more of a wants to praise everybody kind of a coach. And so for him to say it's an area of focus and that they're spending extra time on it, that's basically as close as he's going to come to saying, yes, this is a problem. And then some of the players, we talked to defensive lineman Chris Jenkins, he said, there's the 4-man pass rush isn't great, essentially, is what he said, and that it needs to get better. And I think the problem is that other than Mike Morris, they don't have anybody, at least in my opinion, who can win consistently against top-tier tackles. And even Mike Morris, when I say win consistently, if you're talking about the level that Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo won at, Morris is still a step below that, but he's the best that they've got. But I don't think Jalen Harrell, I don't think Braden McGregor, I don't think Taylor Upshaw, those guys haven't proved that they can win one-on-ones consistently. And that's why Michigan has had to rely on linebackers and defensive backs coming out of the secondary. The one name to watch, in my opinion, is Iyabi Oki. And this is the guy that was the high-profile 5-star transfer, originally committed to Alabama, expelled from the university, then went to Houston, kicked off the team at Houston, and then wound up at UT Martin at the FCS level and played pretty well last season. His athletic traits and his speed and his get-off at the line of scrimmage are better than just about anybody they have on the roster. And so Harbaugh has alluded to the fact that his playing time is going to increase in the coming weeks. And I think the reason for that is they know that he gives them something a little bit different as a pass rusher. And so I would not be surprised if 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks from now, we're looking at a Mike Morris, Yabi Oki top pairing at pass rusher rather than Mike Morris, Jalen Harrell, and then some combination of Braden McGregor and Taylor Upshaw.
Well, as we prepare for the first road game, the Iowa game on Saturday, Michael, some injuries are of concern. Still no Donovan Edwards. Jim has been very vague when discussing what's wrong with Eric All. Have you heard anything on what might be going on with those two?
So Donovan Edwards, we know it's a leg injury of some sort. That's all we know. Based on, sort of my understanding of the way Jim describes injuries over the course of the last year that I've been on the beat, I would say Donovan Edwards is pretty close to coming back. I wouldn't surprise me if he was in uniform against Iowa. Now, whether he plays, I don't know, but I think he's just about to the point where he's going to be back. I mean, you saw him on the sideline celebrating with teammates, jumping up and down, running and stuff like that to congratulate Corum after touchdowns or other players after big plays. And if his leg was at all bothering him, I don't think he'd be, hooting and hollering up and down the sideline the way that he was. Now, Eric All is the big concern. And I reported on Sunday that, there's always the chance that Eric could have suffered an undisclosed injury in practice. He could have slipped in the shower, who knows. But Eric has been dealing with a significant back injury since last season. And I was told by a source familiar with what's going on with Eric that it bothered him since last season through the winter into the spring, and that it showed up and was flagged on medical scans this summer, at which point some people advised him to have surgery on his back to just take care of it and get rid of the problem as soon as possible. Eric didn't want to do that. He went through training camp, played the first couple of games of the season, and then I was told that the pain had not subsided, and it is believed that his absence against Maryland was linked to renewed discussions about whether or not he should undergo back surgery. So I personally do not think that we will see Eric All anytime soon, and the source that I spoke to said it would not surprise him if Eric All is out for the season. So that could be a very significant loss for Michigan, but who knows? Maybe Eric finds a way to play through it, or maybe he finds an injection or some sort, an injection of some sort for his back that will work pretty well. But the bottom line is that at some point, it seems likely Eric All will need back surgery, and I think we're trending toward that point sooner than later.
Well, that's too bad. So I'm sure we'll get some more news over the coming weeks, though. Well, this week, Michigan leaves, as we know, the friendly confines of the Big House for the first time to play Iowa. The Hawkeye offense has struggled. That's well documented. Coach Ferentz said the other day he runs an RPO offense with a capital R. And I thought they ran the ball pretty well against Rutgers. It was an improvement. Not only is that offensive line physical, their running backs, the three they use, are physical. So I think this is going to be another good test for that defensive line. Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right. And I thought Jim Harbaugh kind of described it in a pretty funny way on his radio show on Monday night when he was talking to John Jansen. He said, every year you hear these stories about Iowa's offense is bad. You hear media reports saying Iowa's offense can't move the football. And he said, but they're still good every single year, and they still have a chance to reach the Big Ten title game every single year. So he's like, is the offense really bad, or is the offense just what the offense is, and their team is so sound on defense and special teams that it doesn't really matter, and they're able to get the job done. So I thought that was an interesting way of putting it, that basically, like, Iowa is what it is on offense. They're always going to be that way because that's the style Kirk Ferentz plays. But the trade-off is that their defense is usually so far above average and their special teams are usually so sound that it makes up for it. And on the balancing act or the sliding scale, whichever way you want to think about it, they still tip toward being a very good team every year. And I think it's going to be a challenge for Michigan. I think J.J. McCarthy is going to have some moments where he's going to have to figure out how he responds when, thousands and thousands and thousands of angry fans and excited fans are screaming and yelling and he can't hear very well, or, his teammates can't get the calls, whatever that may be. So I think it's going to be a good test for Michigan on both sides of the ball. And, with Michigan State struggling, you never want to rule any team out in a rivalry game because, as people have seen over the years, rivals that are having a downtrodden season can certainly surge up and surprise somebody. But I would say that Iowa, Penn State, and Ohio State are the three toughest games on the schedule. And you might say that going to Iowa is tougher than facing Penn State at home, even though Penn State is, playing very well and looks like they're on the fringes of becoming a top 10 team. So you could argue that this is the second toughest test that J.J. McCarthy will face all season before he goes down to Columbus right after Thanksgiving. And so I think it's a massive test for Michigan. I'm really, really intrigued and excited to see how it plays out, because it's really the prime definition of one team's strength smashing into the other team's strength, and I'm just so curious to see how it plays out.
No, absolutely. So am I. And when you look at that Iowa offense, I got to see the Iowa State game and then last Saturday night's Rutgers game. Spencer Petras takes a lot of heat from not only the Iowa fan base, but from national observers. He has 3 starting receivers that have been out all year, and they do have 2 really good tight ends, though. Still, when you watch them, it's hard to imagine them having sustained success against this Michigan secondary and defense, isn't it?
I agree. And I think that if you were to ask me for my best prediction of how this game plays out, I think it's a very ugly game in which Iowa doesn't score a lot of points and Michigan doesn't score a lot of points, but that there will be a time when Iowa's offense makes a mistake or has an untimely 3 and out, and in a field position battle, J.J. McCarthy and Michigan's offense is just, because of the edge and explosiveness and the edge at the skill positions, that they're just able to get into the end zone maybe once or twice, and that might be enough. I could see this, for example, being some kind of a 20-6 type of game, or a 17-7 type of game, something like that. So I think it's going to be, really ugly. I think it's going to be sort of a stalemate type of a thing. But I agree with you. I just don't see how Iowa moves the ball consistently against Michigan. Now, there's always exceptions to that, right? Like a defender falls and, Petras has a wide open player for a 50-yard touchdown because the cornerback slipped. Or maybe there's 3rd and 15, and all of a sudden it's a crucial pass interference penalty that pushes Iowa from near midfield into field goal range, and they get a cheap shot, or they get an easy field goal that way. Chip shot was the word I was looking for there. Sorry. So there's all these different things about how a game can play out that you just never know. But overall, I agree with your assessment, Mike. I don't see how they can move the ball consistently, and I just think Michigan will be able to move it slightly better than they do, and that, I think, will be enough to get a win for Michigan, although it might not be a convincing one.
No, I agree. I mean, in my lifetime, I haven't seen us waltz into Kinnick Stadium, even when we've been favored by double digits, and come away with a comfortable win. It is a very difficult place to play. And, when you think about J.J. going in there in this offense, to me, as far as a game plan, I would think number one priority is play from the lead against these guys, even if it's 7 points. But just play from some kind of a lead, because if you get into a muck-it-up game with Iowa and the way they play, you could really have problems.
Yeah, and that was sort of the recipe, or maybe not the recipe. That was sort of how things unfolded in the Big Ten title game in Indianapolis, right? You had Michigan racing up by 2 scores right away, so it was 14-0. And I remember, I can't remember if I was sitting next to, 2 of my colleagues were there, Reiner Saban and Sean Windsor, and I can't remember who I was sitting next to that day, but I remember turning to one of them, and as soon as it got to 14-0, I turned to him and I said, that's it, game's over, because Iowa wasn't going to score 14 points. And it turned out they came nowhere close to scoring 14 points. So I think establishing the run, playing from the lead, and finding ways for JJ to get some easy completions early on, whether it's some play action and short crossing routes, whether it's the bootlegs, whether it's, whatever they can scheme up, swing passes to Roman Wilson, so that he can get comfortable quickly and sort of not have to feel the pressure of needing to convert a 3rd and 10 or, some kind of key 4th down, 4th and 2, 4th and 3, if they're right past midfield on the edge of field goal range. So make it as easy for J.J. McCarthy in the first quarter while finding a way to put up a score early. And I think that will really calm any nerves that he may have. But, as you noted in sort of your build up to this question here, not an easy place to play no matter how much you're favored by. And I saw a stat on Twitter yesterday, and if I'm repeating this incorrectly, I apologize, but I believe of the last 6 times an AP top 5 team has gone to play at Iowa is 5-1 in those games. And so it is not an easy place to play. As Jim Harbaugh noted in his Monday news conference, it's where top 5 teams go to die, and that's what Michigan is facing this weekend.
Well, final question before we let you get away, Michael. We know it's still early in the season, and Michigan needs to get a lot better. They have plenty of time to do that. Penn State looks like a force this year. As you said, they're on the fringe of being a top 10 team. And Ohio State, well, they look otherworldly when you see them play. It's almost depressing watching them, Michael. I mean, they just look like a team playing on a level that's unstoppable, don't they?
Yeah, they look really good. I mean, I think there was probably a glimmer of hope around the Big Ten when people watched that season opener against Notre Dame, and the offense kind of looked stuck in the mud for a while. And then when Notre Dame proceeded to sputter late in the game, and then also in their subsequent games in weeks 2 and 3, people thought, well, maybe Ohio State isn't that good. But then all of a sudden, Ohio State chugs to life, and they've done it despite having injuries at the running back position and the wide receiver position. I mean, C.J. Stroud can make any throw you want. But the big difference, I think, is on defense, where they brought in a new defensive coordinator, plucked him from Oklahoma State, Jim Knowles, and it's really, really been a turnaround on that side of the ball for Ohio State. So again, last year I picked Ohio State to beat Michigan, and obviously I was wrong, and obviously I was extremely wrong in terms of the manner of that game, with Michigan proving that it was big enough, tough enough, and strong enough to bully the Buckeyes, which is not what I expected at all. So perhaps I'll be wrong again this year. But right now, I just think that this year's Ohio State team is better than last year's Ohio State team. And even if Michigan's defense this year overall, from player 1 to player 11, might be better than last year, I just think that some of the game-changing plays that Hutchinson and Ojabo gave you, whether it was a big strip sack, whether it was a big pressure, whether it was something that could kill a drive when you absolutely needed a drive to be killed, I'm not sure they quite have those type of players in their system that even when the defense might, wobble a little bit, can shut things down in one instance with a key play. And so that's why I kind of think, this year it favors the Buckeyes a little bit more. But like I said, I was dead wrong last year, and perhaps I'll be dead wrong again this year.
Well, there's a lot of football yet to be played, as we all know, and Michigan just has to concentrate on Michigan and get better. And going to Iowa this week, that is going to be a huge test. With us on the program today has been beat writer Michael Cohen from the Detroit Free Press. Michael, always a pleasure having you on the show. We thank you for carving out some time for us, and we look forward to that next visit.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Mike.
On Quick Hits today, no injury updates from Jim. Donovan Edwards might play, we'll see. Eric All will definitely not be in action. Nothing on the injury front has changed from Jim's Monday presser. Here are a few game day notes of interest. We lead the series with 43 wins against 15 losses, and there have been 4 ties through the years. Iowa won the first ever meeting with us, 28-5, on November 10th of 1900, in a game played in Detroit. Our last meeting was in the Big Ten Championship game, as we all remember, on December 4th of last year, a 42-3 win for us. Kirk Ferentz is in his 24th year as head man at Iowa. His record is 181 wins against 111 losses. Last year, the Hawkeyes finished the season as West Division champions. They were 7-3 in the Big Ten, 10-4 overall. They played in the Citrus Bowl to end the season and lost to Kentucky 20-17. They ended the season ranked 23rd in both polls. They returned 8 starters on both offense and defense. Kickoff is set for 12 noon, and the weatherman says we'll see sunny skies and temps in the low 70s, so perfect football weather. So here we go. The first road trip of the year is always interesting. Playing at Kinnick against this rugged Iowa team will be a challenge, but we'll be up to it. I just hope it's not a nail-biter. In my lifetime, I've seen way too many of those at Kinnick. Next week, we stay on the road with a trip to Bloomington. The Hoosiers are struggling, but it's another road game for us, and they can be a pesky bunch down there. On Tuesday's Visitors Edition, my guest will be the voice of IU football and basketball, Don Fisher. Don is in his 50th year up in the booth, calling the action for the Hoosiers. Then on Thursday's Game Day show, we'll hear from beat writer Austin Meek with The Athletic. So make sure you tell your Michigan friends and family about the show, and tune us in. That will do it for this week. Have a great Wolverine weekend, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Think victory, beat Iowa. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!